Hi, and welcome to the Safety in Numbers podcast, talking all things education and math sometimes, because that's my jam. I am your hostess, Sheila Hansen, and this is episode 3, but it's actually a part 2 of episode 2, Teaching the Unreachable Student, part 2. It's a very complex topic that's taking... I didn't want to do it a disservice by trying to squish it all into 15 minutes. Quick recap of the last episode. Apathy is not laziness. Apathy is fear. The human needs, you have survival, love and belonging, power, freedom, and fun. Those are from Dr. Glasser's choice theory book. There were 3 stories that I gave. There was the perfectionist, there was the person who had to save face, and then there was the person who needed someone else to be in control. And then we talked about why is learning risky for some students. Risks are very real to those students. Real enough to make them stop and not go further with their education or their thought process. In this episode, we're going to reframe how you look at students. It's not an us versus them. It's not teachers versus students, because that's that adversarial relationship again. And with all adversarial relationships, there is a winner and there is a loser. And that is not a relationship you want to cultivate between a teacher and a student. Rather, I want you to see your apathetic students, especially as students who are full of fear. We're also going to talk about some steps and some techniques for awakening confidence in your apathetic students. There is no guarantee and there are no quick solutions. All of these techniques are going to take time, consistency, and a lot of effort on your part. As I said in the last episode, there are 3 types of apathy. There were 2 that I worked on when I was studying my master's degree, and it's the first 2. The third one I kind of developed on my own based on my experiences since I finished my master's degree in 2008, especially in the last 10 years. So like since 2014 till now, I've noticed a third one. So if a student is apathetic towards a subject, so the subject matter, then this fear is based around a particular subject based on prior experiences in that subject. They might have had issues like, especially math is my jam, so that's where I'm going to be coming from. It could also be reading or science or social studies or art or whatever you teach. There are fears based around that subject for some kids. There's a lot of fear for a lot of kids based around math in general. They'd be like, Miss Hansen, I love you, you're my favorite teacher, but I don't like math. And I get that. I understand that. But that fear is a fear of failure or fear of not being able to understand what everybody else knows. So then they feel ostracized. That's what you're working with when you have a student who is apathetic towards the subject matter. If you have a student who is apathetic towards the teacher, but the subject doesn't bother them, then this is a fear based around either a certain teacher because they've had past experiences with that teacher, or just teachers in general, especially stricter teachers. And again, this is fear of not being able to live up to the standards of that teacher, or fear that that teacher will single them out and embarrass them. That fear of embarrassment can be very, very powerful. Not in a good way. That's not a good, positive way to gain power as a teacher, to embarrass your students. There are a few very rare occasions when embarrassing a student actually was an effective tool to change their behavior, but those cases are extremely rare. And the last one is apathetic towards themselves. So this is a fear based around adults always rescuing that student from any mistake or anything difficult at school or any aspect of their life. So they face something difficult, an adult immediately dives in and rescues them from that difficulty. So parents might think that this is just what you do. And there are certain things you would rescue a student from. But if this is something that the student can do for themselves and they are rescued from it, then the message that the student gets is one I know is not intended. And it's one that I realized in the last 5 years of my teaching is much more prominent than we like to think. A lot of people think, oh, well, if a student has been rescued by adults in their life a lot, they are feeling entitled, like they don't have to do anything in the world. And that's what it looks like on the outside. But what it actually is that the student gets the message that the adults in my life don't think I am good enough, or they don't think I'm smart enough to do these difficult things, and I have to be rescued. So it becomes a I can't scenario. And it is very, very difficult to break through that thought process. This is one of the hardest ones that I found in the last 5 years. I had to be very, very intentional with the student to get them to try one problem that they didn't like. Just try. Just write something down. What do you think? And it's a constant. I talk to that single student, one student, while everybody else is working a lot. Once they start going, it does build fairly quickly, but you have to start over again every single day. It is a very, very challenging type of apathy to work with. I do caution you, because the things we're talking about here are not formulas for success. They are not guaranteed. It is not a if you input X, you get Y, because students are not formulas. They are not math problems. They are not little widgets that you can adjust them, and change their programming. They're human beings, and they have emotional baggage, just like you have emotional baggage. They have needs and feelings and self-doubts and fears, just like you do. And the way we handle that has got to be different based on the kid. And in order to do that, you have to know the kid. And it takes a lot of time and effort to get to know the kid and to implement these strategies. There are 3 components to my strategies, and there are no guarantees that any of the components will work. In fact, at the very end of this episode, I'm going to talk to you about a situation in which I had a student in which nothing I tried worked. It's a sad situation, but I'm going to describe what happened there. What I'm talking about for the rest of this video is a blend of choice theory and love and logic. Like, choice theory is much more of the psychology of it. Love and logic is much more of the practical application of that psychology. So there are 3 areas that we're going to address with these techniques. First one is the parent component. The second component is relationship building. And the last component of the area is teaching the student how to set goals for themselves. The parent component, as I said, this is the most difficult of the 3 parts, because you can't force a parent to do what you've asked them to do. In fact, when you can get the parent involved, it works so much better, because they have support. They're supporting you in the student's home, and you are supporting the student at school, so you get from both sides. The student is getting care and techniques from both sides, no matter where they're at. How I usually approach the parents is in a conference. So if I notice that a student is really struggling, and I notice that they have some apathy, no matter which type, have a conference with the parent. Either face-to-face, which is what I prefer, because I like to be able to read their body language, or on the phone. Occasionally email, that tends to be the easiest way to get a hold of parents, but again, it lacks that body language nuance. If you can get a face-to-face or a telephone call, it's better. If all you got to email, then it is what it is. You've got what you got. But I often will say, and especially from my point of view as a teacher who never had kids, I am not a parent. It's difficult for parents to see me as somebody who knows a good idea for helping their kid. So what I will usually say is, I'll start out a conversation. I have seen these behaviors in child X. I don't usually say your child. I will say, I have seen behaviors in little Sheila. I am concerned because these behaviors have led to these behaviors. And again, I'm not saying you need to do this. I'm just saying this concerns me. I'm afraid this might happen. And then I will say, I have some suggestions for you to try at home. Are you interested in them? And then it goes from there. And they might say, yeah, I'll hear it out. But then it really is up to them to do it. And that's the part that's out of your control. I'll give them the information. I'll even refresh the information. I will type it out in an email so they can go back and read it, but you have no control. So once that, bird is out of the cage, it's going to fly wherever it wants. But the main thing for them to do, first of all, is to create a safe home environment. And by safe, obviously, I'm meaning survival needs first and foremost, but also a safe place for that kid to voice the fact that they are afraid of failing. Making sure that the student's 5 needs are being met is a good way to insulate them against failure. I always suggest that children have a specific chore that they do around the house that is theirs and that they don't get paid for. And that's important because then they feel that they are contributing to the family as a whole, that they belong to that family. Then they also have control over that chore, and that chore influences the rest of the family. So for instance, if it's taking out the trash in the kitchen when the trash gets too full, that affects everybody. Because when you're trying to throw something away, if the trash can's full, it just gets gross. They can see that. That's their part in it. Chores really do help build a child's sense of power within themselves. What they're doing helps everybody out. It benefits everyone, and that it makes them a part of the family as a contributor. Providing for a child's 5 needs, there's love and belonging, obviously survival, love, belonging, and power. I just talked about those two. Freedom and fun. A child needs to have, and I find it's beneficial, and I've heard this from many parents who have done this, as children age, they bestow upon them more choices that they get to do. And they make kind of a production out of it, like, oh, Sheila, you just turned 13. You know what that means? You now get to choose if you brush your teeth in the morning or at night. I don't know what you're going to give them to choose. That has to do with your family. But give them choices. Like now you can choose the color of paint on your wall. Now you can choose, have a little bit more freedom in choosing your clothing. Like, I am no longer going to pick your clothes out for you. Of course, I think that should occur much younger than 13. But those are some things to think about that allows for freedom. And then when their needs are being met, it's a whole lot more fun. When a student brings work home, I tell the parents, don't point out that they missed number 5. In fact, I want you to act like you don't even see number 5. But look at like, oh, you got number 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10. Look at that. You got those right. Just ignore the fact that 5 and 7 had mistakes. The kid might point them out and you'd be like, yeah, man, what happened there? Oh, I see. But don't allow those missed ones to create a sense of anger in you. That's what I tell the parent. Because then the child believes that their poor performance is tearing apart their relationship with their parent. And that's not a way you want to present that. Notice that they did good. Ask them, how did you do that? How'd you get number 1 through 4 right? You struggled with those last week. How did you do that? And if they're able to tell you, great. Say, wow, that's really insightful. And don't be sarcastic with it. Students who are apathetic are very, very sensitive to sarcasm. Sarcasm is like my second language. That was like our love language when I was a child in my family. Students who are apathetic are very, very sensitive to being made fun of and being put down. So if there's a sarcastic tone in your voice, then they feel like you're making fun of them. And that's going to shut them down. So without any sarcasm, just like, I noticed that you got 1 through 4 right. How did you do that? And if they're able to tell you, great, that's wonderful. If they'd be like, I don't know, and say, well, did you cheat? No. Did you try hard? Or are you getting smarter? And I would often give those 3 choices all at the same time, like, well, did you cheat? Did you try hard? Or are you getting smarter? And let them choose. Sometimes they will say, oh, I cheated. Be like, well, that's always an option. It is never the best option because, and you can go into why cheating is not a good option for permanent learning. Oftentimes they would just say that, especially adolescents will say it out of shock value. They just want to see what your reaction is going to be. See if you're going to be angry at them. Be like, nope. Cheating, in this family, cheating will get you, you'll have to go to bed, start going to bed earlier because that's a sign of immaturity, something like that. But you always speak to them with concern and with love in your voice, not with anger over an assignment that was done poorly. And I realize you have to be very intentional with these conversations as that parent because the emotion in your voice is very important to how the child will receive it. If you act with anger, the child will act with being defensive and push back. If you act with concern, and this is straight from love and logic, if you act with concern and with empathy, then the child is more open to looking at their own mistake as possibly something they shouldn't have done. Or perhaps should try to do better next time. And then they usually will work up to, oh, I worked really hard on that one. I actually got some help from my buddy sitting behind me. Or they might, you know what? I'm getting smarter at this. That one takes a little bit more time for them to say, because sometimes people feel like complimenting themselves, like I am smart. They feel like that's vanity and that you shouldn't do that. But recognizing your own gifts is not vanity. Bragging about your gifts, like, haha, I'm smarter than you, that's bad. But just saying, I'm smart, I did this page by myself. I did it. And recognizing that they have value, intrinsic value, is very, very important to combating apathy. That's the parent component. I would have it over a face-to-face conference, and then whatever it is you decide, whatever plan that you do, whatever you tell them, I would also email it to them so then they can go back and read it. The other part of this, building a relationship with the student, is the part that you have control of. I cannot emphasize this too much. Building a relationship does not mean you become your student's best buddy. You are not your student's friends. Your actions may be friendly, and your actions should be friendly, but you are a teacher, not their peer. That connection there, teacher to student, has an appropriate distance that friendship does not have. There is a sense of authority over the student, and it needs to be positive authority. Yes, there can be authority that is negative and is controlling, and that's not what I'm talking about. Appropriate authority over a student that friendships do not have. What you are building here is a personal connection. You are learning about the student as a human being and as a person, not just as, John Smith who sits in third desk back in row 3. But you're getting to know John Smith as a person, as a human being. What do they like? What do they not like? Do they play baseball? Are they in the Scholars Bowl Club? Do they go to church? Do they not? Just some of those things are things you can discuss. Sometimes you can relate, be like, you know what? My parents were divorced. This happened and this happened. And then you can have a discussion. But this is just to build a personal connection and to build trust with that child. Because to get somebody to take a risk, the risks that we talked about, they have to be able to trust you. And they have to know that you know them as a human being and not just as a person. Nobody likes going to government agencies that just know you because of your social security number. Because they don't know you as a human being and they don't treat you as a human being. And students are the same way. We need to get to know them as a human being. They have to trust the teacher in order to risk failing. And if they don't trust that teacher, they are not going to take that risk. Or if they do and they fail, they are going to blame you. And they will never be introspective about anything to improve. It will always be your fault, mom's fault, my dog's fault, the subject's fault, anything but theirs, because their self-image is too fragile to turn it inward. When you are speaking to a student about their performance or about some behavior that they've done, take it into the hallway where you can still see your class, but you can have a conversation with them that is in semi-private. So you never want to have a conversation with a student behind closed doors when it's just you and that student. That is a bad thing to do. You need to be out and my school had cameras in the hallway, so I would stand next to the door. I had my eye facing into my classroom. The kid was between me and the classroom so that I could talk to them and still see my classroom. This is a semi-private setting, but the class couldn't hear what I was saying. I was outside of their earshot, but the kid, then I take away their audience. When you take away their audience, you take away their pressure to perform, they're more likely to hear you and what you're saying. Like, hey, Sheila, you didn't bring your homework again, and this is the 3rd day in a row. Can you tell me what's going on here? So you approach it not accusing them, like, you should bring your homework, Sheila, but rather, this is the 3rd time, man, what's going on? And start that conversation. You will not likely get to the bottom of that issue in one conversation. In multiple conversations, you'll start to get the picture. When a student does something that is good or that is not apathetic, they take a risk, never say, good job, way to go, you're awesome. Any sort of a statement that has a judgment with it. If it is an apathetic student, they are going to assume that you are trying to manipulate them or that you're lying to them to try and make them feel better. It's never a good idea. You do notice when they do something that is they took a risk and you want to recognize that, you say, hey, Sheila, I noticed you brought your homework today. You don't say anything about whether or not it was right or complete or anything. I noticed you brought it. Yeah, well, I found it in the bottom of my locker, so, Okay, I just noticed that. No judgment on it. That way they can't say you're lying or no, I didn't and disagree with you. Because you're not telling them, hey, you did a good job. You're saying, I noticed. And so they can't really argue with that. Take note of things that they like that have nothing to do with school. Like I was talking about earlier. If they're in a sport, ask them, hey, when's your next game? Oh, what position do you play? I don't know a lot about sports as a person. I like hockey. You can see that. That's about the only sport I know anything about. But I would ask them those questions because I'd hear them talking about it in the hallways and stuff. So I'd ask them. They might tell me their position, and I have no idea what it means. So then I would say, well, what do you do in that position? What's that? What does that entail? Is that the position you wanted? And that sort of thing. Just make a conversation. And they will recognize that you are noticing them for things other than school. You might notice the shirts that they wear. Do they have a team shirt that they wear? A particular cartoon shirt that they wear? Perhaps they wear the exact same outfit every single day of the week for months and months, and it starts to smell. Notice that. Hey, Sheila, I noticed that you've got the same outfit on you've worn all week. Do you have like 5 of those? And this is a conversation I would not do in front of other students. I'd be like, you got 5 of those shirts, or do you just wash it every night or something? Nah, I don't really change my clothes. I kind of sleep in this shirt, Then sometimes that might send up a red flag. Be like, oh, do you have like pajamas and other clothes to change into? Like the school has some resources if you need clothing. And then you can start those conversations, which are also very important to have, because then you can sometimes get into finding out about issues that might involve whether or not they are actually safe in their own home. And then you can start working on taking steps for that. If they always have a drawing or a sketchbook with them, I noticed you like to sketch a lot. And then, I noticed that you sketch people's faces really well. And lately it's been like, I noticed that you enjoy anime art very much. I don't really care much for it, but I notice that they like it. And the fact that I notice it doesn't have to be something that I care much for, but it has to be something that they value. And when they value it, and I notice that they value, then I'm noticing them for something that has nothing to do with my subject, nothing to do with math. And then they're like, in their head, they're like, she sees me as a human being. I like that. She doesn't just see me as somebody who fails at math. She sees me as a person, and that builds that trust, that builds that relationship. Remain friendly, always, and supportive, especially when they try and fail, which they will do. Or if they even fail to try. Hey, Sheila, I noticed, the past couple of weeks you got your homework turned in, and then today you didn't. Did you leave it in your locker? There are some kids that I would give them sort of under-the-table privileges, like going to their locker to get their homework on occasion. And that little bit of favor, let them know that I cared about them. I didn't do it all the time. Like if Sheila, you didn't bring your homework to class again, I can't let you go every day because I don't let everybody do that. I can't let you do that. I'll let you go this once, but make sure you have it in class tomorrow. And if they don't, then I'll be like, I'm sorry, man, I can't let you go and get it. Bring it to me later and we'll talk like that. But set the standard. If you say you're going to hold them to that standard, then hold them to that standard. If you say, okay, you've got one chance, then the next time don't give them one more chance, because what that shows them is that your boundaries are fake and that you lie. They can't trust you. You said one more chance, you're giving them another. What else are you not trustworthy in? So if you say something, make sure you follow through, or make sure that you say what you mean. And holding a boundary with a student, even one that has a self-image problem, is a good example for teaching them how to stand up for themselves. You do it in a friendly way, but a boundary way. So, no, I'm not going to let you go to your locker today. I let you go yesterday, and I'm not going to let you go. I'm sorry that you forgot your homework. You can bring it to me during lunch or something like that. But remain friendly, never judgmental. If they feel that your positive relationship with them is dependent on their performance in your class, then they will cut you out. They will shut down. There's no more trust there anymore. because then they can let you down. If they know that their performance is what lets you down, then they're not going to put any effort into it because they don't want to let you down. Notice when they succeed, but no judgment on it. Like, I noticed that you got a C on that test, and it's hard to resist saying, well done, good job. But just, I noticed you got a C. Last time I remember you got a D, and this is a C. I noticed that. You'll have to practice it because innate in our being is the way to go, the cheerleader. And for kids who have good self-esteem and good self-image, they like to be cheered on. But for your students who are apathetic, it feels like you are just buttering them up and telling them lies to try and make them do more work. They feel manipulated. So you say something like this, I noticed you brought your pencil today, Sheila. And that's it. You don't say, way to go. Just, I noticed. Do you need a sharpener? I have a handheld sharpener right over there. It does a great job in sharpening pencils. Or you can use the knuckle buster on the wall. When they do succeed at a test or at an assignment, ask them how they did that. Sheila, how did you remember your pencil today? I noticed you remembered it. How'd you do that? Or I noticed that you got a C on the test. How did you do that? And if they say, I don't know, I just did. Well, did you cheat? Or did you work hard? Or did you try hard? Or are you getting smarter? And if they say they cheated, just like with the parents, if they say they cheated, be like, well, you cheated. I can't give you credit on the test. I can give you an alternate test. You'll have to come in and take it. A lot of times they just say it for reaction effect to see what you're going to do. And they might take it back and be like, no, I didn't actually cheat. I kind of studied my notes better. I took better notes this time. I did 2 of my assignments. So they might be able to articulate better how they were able to get those scores. And then they start attributing their test scores and their performance in your class as coming from their effort and not just from you bestowing it upon them. But I earned this grade, not you gave me the grade. There's a very, very powerful difference there. Try building a relationship with your entire class by just taking one day in the week to be creative and play. And I'm not talking about totally non-structured play. We're talking structured play here. But there are all kinds of like icebreakers, games, minute to win it style stuff that kids can do as teens. And it benefits them socially, and social skills are so important since 2020. There's so many kids that they cannot look you in the eye. I know teachers that cannot have a conversation while looking somebody in the eye. And that's a skill to have because you can't read somebody's body language if you can't look them in the eye. So this practices these skills. I always had board games in my class. They could play a board game, and that was what they did. You can choose the board game. I don't want to play a board game. Well, you can play with a deck of cards, but you can't just sit here and draw. Pick one of these things. And if they didn't have any friends in any other groups, I would pick them up. I would find the friendliest group because you know your kids who are the friendliest and say, all right, well, hey, would you guys let Sheila come into your group? Sure, come on. And they might pout and act miserable the whole time, but they're out of their comfort zone and trying it. I always had a fun Friday, or it used to be called a super happy fun day. And sometimes I called it a genius hour because we would actually create stuff. Like I had these blocks, these 1-inch cubes, and I would build these constructions out of them. And I would have the kids tell me how many blocks are in that construction. And the trick is you cannot touch the blocks. It was on a table at the front of my classroom. They could go and look around and like count like this, but I had all sorts of cubes that were underneath that they couldn't see. And they had to go back to their tables and talk about it and be like, sketch some drawings out and figure it out themselves. Those were my genius hour type games. And then other times it was just card games. The game 99, if you don't know how to play that one, it's in my games playlist. Drop and Give Me 10 is in my games list. These are all games I played in my classroom. Race to 100. They loved that game because of the funky dice. And I would often raise the difficulty of it and have them use the 20-sided dice. So then they had to mentally add the 2-digit numbers. Starting out with do one with a tiny little 4-sided dice, the little tetrahedron, and then with the 6-sided, and then the 10-sided, and then the 12-sided, and then the 20-sided. So they gradually got more and more difficult. Games. just to learn social skills, and it gives you a chance to talk to kids that you need to talk to more. So you might say like, hey, Sheila, I know you're in that game. When that game is finished, come up here. I got something I want to ask you. I always present it as not, I want to tell you something. I got something I want to ask you about. That way they're like, oh, I'm not in trouble. She just wants to ask me a question. And it's one of those things where if I can't be far enough out of earshot from the other students, I'll stand in the hallway, again in the doorway where I can see the kids. And, hey, Sheila, I just want you to know that I noticed this week you turned your homework in 3 times. Can you talk to me about that? Or it could be the reverse. Sheila, I noticed this week, you only turned in 3 assignments. Can you tell me, is there something going on? Is your locker a mess? Or did my binder exploded and some big kid threw it in the dumpster? Or this one I like, my mom cleaned out my binder and she threw all my papers away. I rarely believe that one. There was one time when a parent actually emailed me and said, I'm sorry, I did clean out my child's binder and I guess I threw their assignment away. So, I mean, it happens, but you talk to the kid. Give them a chance to make the assignment up. But this game day allows you to have some one-on-one time with the students who need a little bit more of your attention. Students come to the classroom with fear and sometimes apathy. Many teachers come to the classroom with their own pride and suspicion of apathetic students. If a teacher will look beyond their own pride, reach out to build a bridge, the students will respond and their suspicions decreased. Teachers notice the students, their pride starts to crumble. The students return the favor because they think, do you see me? Teachers' suspicions are gone because a bridge is built. Teacher extends respect to the student. A respected student has less fear and therefore less apathy and responds with trust to the teacher. Now you have a respected student connected to a trusted teacher. You have a working relationship. The last thing I do is I teach goal setting. And I do it the Glasser way that I learned when I was doing my master's degree, and that's something called GPAR. It's goal, plan, action, result. So you set a goal, you write a plan, you carry out the plan, and then you look at your results. And the looking at the results part is the most critical part of that goal setting style. Students need to learn self-reflection with an eye on improving and not judging. Students often, if they got a poor grade on a test, I would tell them, okay, here's your 10 seconds to feel sad. Okay, so now we're going to feel sad later and think about what you need to do so that this doesn't happen again. Or what could you do next time to make your grade higher? Just things of that nature. Self-reflection. What can I do to improve myself? And realize that they have a reset button. Because they didn't do well on that first test, they can start all over again on the second one and be like, okay, that didn't work. I need to rethink and do something different. Especially in middle school, nothing is ever permanent. Like, you can say it's a part of their permanent grade, but I mean, how many times does a high school teacher look back at your middle school grades? How many times do people in college look back at your high school grades, especially individual class grades? So there is a sense of, yes, it's important to do your best, but if you make a mistake or you fail once, you always get a chance to start over. Every adult knows this. If you fail at something you try, you can either never do that again or change your strategy. Try something else. People tried and failed it. Well, bring up something that most people are familiar with, and that's like getting in shape or losing weight. You can lose weight, but then you gain it back. So you failed. Well, you can try again and try again and try again. Find something that works for you. That's the trial and error way of living your life. And kids need to understand that if you try something and it doesn't work, you can try again. You can try something else. Kind of like a reset button. Again, there are no guarantees. And if there is no guarantee, then why try this? Most students will change their behavior when this approach is applied consistently. And your consistency is the key. I mean, everybody has their off days, but an off day when you're trying to earn the trust of an apathetic student can be a huge setback. So do your best to fake it. Be like, "Hi Sheila, I'm so glad you were able to make it to class today. It's good to see you. Oh, I noticed you're wearing your blue shirt. And I might be miserable inside, but I'm going to do my best to not show my misery upon that student because they are ultra sensitive to how I respond to them." Now I'm going to tell you the story about a kid whom I'll call Kevin. He was a kid I had in an 8th grade, might have been 7th grade class, many, many years ago. I had gone to a Love and Logic workshop here in town, and I had the little Love and Logic book. They had a booklet that you used, and I went through and I did everything that I could for Kevin. And he would keep his head down, hood over his head during class, tap him on the shoulder. He would sit up. As soon as I walked away, his head went back down. I tried the I noticed. I tried the what do you like, having conversations with him. There was nothing there. I got no response. It broke my heart. So the next year when Jim Fay came through with the conference and the workshop again, I shared that story with him. And because he's like, if there's anybody in here who has tried all of these things and it didn't work with that student, tell me about it and you will win like $70 worth of their books and CDs and stuff. And so I raised my hand and I told him about Kevin. He looked at me and he said, he was on drugs, wasn't he? And I said, yeah, we later found that out. And he's like, well, you hit the jackpot. But tears are starting to come to my eyes now because it's heartbreaking to see a kid go through that. I didn't realize what it was at the time. Later on, he was hotlined because of other stuff that happened and they discovered this. He's like, well, you win the $70, but it doesn't feel very good, does it? And I said, no, it doesn't. So these do work the majority of the time, but unfortunately there are times when things get the best of a student. And with this kid that had been using drugs, there was no getting to them because the drugs had control of their mind. That was a hard story to share. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. My email address is safetyandnumbers3.14@gmail.com. The books that I use, again, I'm going to link to how you can get them in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode.